The desert was no place for kindness. Men rode through its heat with guns at their hips and dust in their throats, and a stranger was often just another problem waiting to be born. But for Malachi Dane, the drifter folk called the loner, silence had been his only companion for too long. His world was built on caution, built on the lessons of betrayal that had carved his soul into something hollow. So when he saw the man stumbling through the heat, boots torn, shirt darkened with sweat, Malachi nearly rode on. The horse beneath him shifted, uneasy, as if sensing his hesitation. The stranger looked like trouble he always did. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, hands bloodied, as though from a fight that hadn't gone his way. Trouble was a shadow that followed such men. Yet something in the man's expression gave Malachi pause. Not desperation, not anger, but a kind of quiet endurance, as if he'd already resigned himself to die alone in the dust. That struck a chord. Malachi reined in his horse. "You got a name?" he asked, his voice low, edged like a blade dulled by too many battles. The man squinted against the Sunday Elias. His words scraped like gravel. "Don't matter much longer. Ain't gonna last another mile." Malachi dismounted, boots sinking into the sand. He knew better than to ask questions. In the frontier, names were smoke and pasts were fire. Both could burn you if you weren't careful. But he saw the tremor in Elias's legs, the way his body leaned forward as though every step was an argument against collapse. Without another word, Malachi unfastened the reins and pressed the horse's bridle into the stranger's hands. Elias blinked, as if he'd misheard. "You ride," Malachi said simply. And just like that, he turned away, a shadow swallowed by the horizon. The desert night was crueler without a horse. Malachi walked, each step pulling him deeper into silence. Coyotes howled from ridges, and stars hung like cold witnesses to his choice. He didn't regret it, not yet, but a voice gnawed at him in the dark. "You just gave away the only friend you had." By dawn, Malachi stumbled into the town of Graythorn. His boots were blistered, throat raw, but he didn't stop. He found a trough, drank until he was sick, and collapsed in the shade of the saloon porch. When he woke, the town wasn't the same. A caravan had rolled in wagons draped in canvas, horses snorting, warriors dismounting with a grace Malachi hadn't seen in years. Their faces were marked with paint, their clothes stitched from hides in patterns that spoke of another life, one older than the town itself. And at the center of them, Elias stood, no longer the broken man Malachi had left in the dust. His posture was tall now, his eyes sharp, as if he'd stepped out of disguise and into his true self. Malachi pushed himself upright. Dust clung to his shirt, but his hand slid instinctively to the grip of his revolver. Elias raised a hand. "Easy, friend. You lent me more than a horse out there. You gave me a chance to return to my people alive." Behind him, the warriors moved like shadows, silent, disciplined. They carried bows, rifles, and an aura of loyalty that made the rougher men of Graythorn nervous enough to keep their distance. Malachi narrowed his eyes. "Your people?" Elias smiled faintly. "A stranger yesterday, a leader today, and now a debt to settle. You saved me. So these men, this caravan, they'll guard you tonight." The loner's blood chilled. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted this. Yet as the day bled into dusk, the streets of Graythorn shifted. Men who once spat when he walked past now glanced nervously at the painted warriors stationed outside his door. What Malachi had offered in silence, he received back in thunder. And when the moon climbed, Elias sat across from him in the lamplight. "Kindness is rare," he said, "but it never dies empty. You'll learn that, even if it costs you." Malachi stared into the fire. He didn't yet know that his act, the simple lending of a horse, had thrown open the gates of a storm. Graythorn was a place where law was measured in bullets. The arrival of Elias's caravan unsettled the fragile balance. The saloon whispered with suspicion. The sheriff eyed the warriors with unease. Farmers clutched their children tighter when they saw paint-striped riders on patrol. Malachi hadn't wanted attention. His name was built on silence, on passing through towns like wind through broken shutters. Now he was the center of a storm he hadn't asked for. That night, As the caravan fires burned outside the town's edge, Elias spoke again of debts and fate. "You think you walk alone," Elias told him, "but even loners leave trails. You gave me your horse, not just leather and bone, but the one thing a man like you can't live without. That isn't small. My people see that. They see you." Malachi's jaw tightened. "I didn't do it for them. Didn't do it for you either. Just didn't want to watch a man die thirsty." Elias studied him, eyes reflecting firelight. "And yet, here you sit, surrounded by men who would lay down their lives before they let yours be taken." The words scraped against Malachi's defenses. He'd spent years building walls, burying trust beneath loss. Once, long ago, he'd ridden with others a brotherhood shattered by betrayal. He could still taste the smoke of that day, still hear the screams. Since then, silence had been his only companion. But Elias's warriors stood guard like statues, their presence steady, unwavering. For the first time in years, Malachi slept without reaching for his gun in the night. By morning, Graythorn had shifted again. Traders approached, curious. Children gathered at the edge of the caravan, eyes wide at the painted horses. Even the sheriff softened his glare, if only to keep peace. Yet peace is a fragile mask. Beneath it, jealousy stirred. Men who once held sway in Graythorn muttered about power, about outsiders stealing influence. And in shadows, Cain Blackthorn, the outlaw who called himself judge over the county, watched. He'd heard of Elias's return. He'd heard of the loner whose single act had drawn warriors into Graythorn's orbit. To a man like Cain, power was currency, and he could smell it gathering around Malachi like fresh blood in the water. By dusk, Cain's riders came black coats, dust trailing behind like smoke. They didn't come to parley, they came to remind Graythorn of who held the reins. And when Cain himself dismounted, boots striking earth like hammers, his eyes found Malachi. "You?" he said, voice like gravel dragged across iron. "One horse, one stranger, and now the balance shifts. Do you know what you've started?" Malachi's silence was his answer. Elias stood beside him, chin raised. "He started nothing. He only showed kindness. The rest belongs to us." Cain's smile was a wolf's. "Then I'll take it back. All of it. Him, you, your painted riders. This town doesn't belong to outsiders. It belongs to me." The air thickened, heavy with unspoken war. The words struck Malachi like blunt iron. He'd seen broken men, starving families, drifters who sold their last cow for a day's bread, but never had he heard of a father turning daughters into currency. The image churned his stomach, and when he looked at Elena now, he didn't see just a frightened bride. He saw scars deeper than skin, wounds that no saloon whiskey or Bible verse could ever mend. She was trembling, staring at her dust-stained wedding dress as if it were chains she couldn't cut loose. Her voice cracked when she spoke again, each word like glass in her throat. "When Harrison Blackwood brought me into his house, I thought maybe Cain would leave me there, that I'd be safe in a gilded cage instead of his. But Harrison was worse, older, meaner. He treated me like a prize he'd bought, and when I fought back," her eyes glistened, and she bit down hard on her lip. "That's when Cain called me a debt unpaid." Malachi felt heat rise behind his eyes, not of tears, but of fury. He wanted to draw his Colt and march into Graythorn, to put an end to Cain's reign with 6 bullets and no words. But fury was a reckless companion, and Cain was not a man you shot at unless you meant to bury him. The porch creaked behind them. Mrs. Crane stepped out, a lantern in one hand, the shotgun in the other. Her face was carved with lines of age and iron resolve. "Girl," she said softly, "there ain't no shame in surviving. The shame belongs to those who made survival your only choice." Elena's shoulders shook, but she nodded, clutching her knees to her chest. Malachi stood, jaw set. "Cain's not just passing through," he muttered. "He'll circle back. He'll bring more men. He'll use your sister against you, Elena, and he'll use this town as leverage. We can't wait here like deer in the brush." Mrs. Crane's gaze flicked to him, sharp and knowing. "Then what's your plan, boy? You take her and run?" He'll track you both, same as before. Or you make a stand here. But understand..." She lifted the lantern, its flame catching the hard glint of her eyes. "Once you make that choice, there ain't no turning back. Not for you, not for her." Malachi let the silence stretch, feeling the weight of it settle over his bones. He had lived a life of moving on, drifting past trouble like wind through wheat. But Elena's trembling form on those steps, her whispered confessions, and Cain's cold claim of ownership, it all fused inside him into something unshakable. He looked at Mrs. Crane. "Then we stand." The old woman nodded once, as if she'd been waiting for him to find that resolve himself. She turned and disappeared into the house, the sound of bolts sliding and locks clanking behind her. Malachi turned back to Elena. She was watching him, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes," Malachi said, his voice steady. "I do." That night was long. The wind moaned through the ranch like an omen, rattling shutters, carrying scents of sage and dust. Malachi sat at the edge of the porch with his rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the black horizon. Elena lay inside, though he doubted she found sleep. Mrs. Crane moved quietly through the rooms, checking shutters, laying out ammunition with the calm efficiency of a woman who had buried more than one man. Sometime after midnight, the sound came, hooves slow, deliberate, like a drumbeat announcing judgment. Malachi's hand tightened on his rifle. He rose silently, stepping into the yard. The moonlight painted the world in shades of silver and shadow. A figure emerged, alone this time. A man with long hair tied back, his face marked with painted lines. His horse was lean, its breath steaming in the chill. He raised a hand in greeting, but his eyes never left Malachi's. "You are Malachi Brooks," the man said in a low, steady voice. Malachi didn't lower the rifle. "Depends who's asking." The rider dismounted with grace, his movements unhurried. "My name is Tohama. My people camp beyond the ridge. We saw Cain ride into Graythorn. We saw what followed. The woman with you, she is under his shadow." Behind Malachi, the door creaked open. Elena stepped onto the porch, lantern light spilling around her. When she saw the newcomer, her breath caught. "Tohama?" she whispered. The warrior's face softened just slightly. "Child, I told you once when you fled, we would watch from the distance. When the day came, we would return." Malachi's brow furrowed. "You know him?" Elena nodded, tears welling. "My mother's people. They kept me safe when I first ran, but Cain's men burned their camp. I thought..." Her voice broke. "I thought they were gone." Tohama stepped forward, his gaze settling on Malachi now with quiet gravity. "We are not gone, and if you choose to defy Cain, our tribe will stand with you. By sunrise, he will not find you unguarded." The rifle felt heavy in Malachi's hands. He had lent a horse once, a simple act that changed a man's fate. Now he was offered something greater, a pledge of lives, of loyalty, of war. Mrs. Crane appeared at the doorway again, her shotgun cradled in her arms. She looked at Tohama, then at Malachi. "Well, boy," she said, voice dry as kindling, "looks like you're not a loner anymore." And as the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, silhouettes appeared along the ridge, dozens, then hundreds. Riders with painted faces, bows strung, rifles gleaming in the dawn. A whole people drawn to the defense of one man's ranch, because he had chosen to protect one woman who had been denied protection her whole life. Malachi looked at Elena, then at the rising Sunday. The path ahead was blood and fire, but for the first time in years, he wasn't walking it alone. The real war had only just begun. And so, when the sun rose over that ranch, it did not rise on a man alone. It rose on a promise that kindness in the face of cruelty can call forth an army, that one act of mercy can change the fate of nations. Malachi had offered food, a shelter, a chance at life, and in return he was given something far greater: loyalty stronger than blood, and warriors bound not by debt but by honor. This is more than a story of guns and land. It is a story of choices, the ones we make when no one is watching. The rancher could have turned away, but he didn't. And because of that, by sunrise, a forgotten mother found her voice, a broken daughter found her courage, and a whole people rose to defend what was right. If this story gripped you, if you believe the past still has lessons to carve into the present, then don't let it vanish into the dust. Share it so others may feel the weight of it. Subscribe so you won't miss the next tale of sacrifice, survival, and the strange coin by which the frontier measured its worth. Because in the end, history isn't written in books alone. It's written in blood, in choices, in the echo of courage. And the next story may change the way you see everything.